It's easy to jump to conclusions about certain games, especially when you haven't played them for yourself. Some games could be easily considered terrible, dull, or downright doomed at first glance. Things aren't always how they seem though, and predictions don't always come to pass. So let's take a look at the worst opinions we've had on certain games, and how those changed. Assassin's Creed Origins. Is that really it? Assassin's Creed was officially on a break before the reveal of Origins, and Ubisoft was apparently retooling the series. When it was officially revealed at E3 2017, the response was fine. Most of us saw the environments, the combat, and the quest design and wondered, is that it? Fortunately, the final game showcased the full extent of the open world and action RPG leanings. Yes, the stealth that defined the franchise was heavily downplayed, but venturing across ancient Egypt as Bayek felt invigorating, different, and fun. Super Lucky's Tale, a bog-standard boring platformer. In the realm of A-list and indie platformers, Super Lucky's Tale came across as just kind of uninspired. At best, it seemed like a platforming game for children due to its family-friendly art style. While not really pushing any boundaries or breaking new ground, Super Lucky's Tale was still pretty fun. Issues like camera controls and length were true, but considering that some of us just didn't see any reason to care, it was a nice surprise. Death Stranding. It's just a bad walking simulator. To call Death Stranding a walking simulator isn't entirely inaccurate, but to dismiss it as a walking simulator in the worst way possible certainly is. For the most part, the game is about exploration, planning your trips across a post-apocalyptic landscape of lush greens and frigid snow. Supernatural oddities like the BTs and projects and messages left by other players abound while you struggle with managing cargo, weight, and movement. It's trippy, and there's a sense of satisfaction to building things and getting likes from others. The story might not be for everyone, but the plot has its charms to go with the stellar presentation. Warframe. It's just pay to win. When Warframe first started gaining popularity, many of those interested inevitably wondered the same thing. Isn't it just pay to win? Concerns about the grind are fairly legit, and while it's possible to purchase weapons and warframes with premium currency, which costs real money, you can also earn that currency through trading. Many of these items are also easily acquired in-game and crafted in one ship, so while there's a definite incentive to pay to skip, you're not strong-armed into spending money for the best stuff. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, Assassin's Creed ripoff. Upon first laying eyes on Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, I proclaimed it a simple Assassin's Creed clone with combat from Batman Arkham Asylum. Both points turned out to be surface-level observations at best. In truth, Shadow of Mordor mixed stealth, combat, both close combat and ranged, and exploration while introducing the stellar Nemesis system. This significantly changed one's interaction with the world as you could manipulate orcs, wreck the hierarchy, and even use them as allies. The ending might have been a bit bleh, but all in all, Shadow of Mordor was much more than just inspired. Mass Effect Andromeda. Downright awful. Who doesn't remember all the memes about the animation and bugs? Those who actually played Mass Effect Andromeda had more serious issues though. What was meant to be a new Mass Effect not only couldn't hold a candle to the previous games, but was considered bad overall. While Andromeda isn't the best game, it's far from the worst, with good combat and some interesting characters. If it had a better overall vision, much more polish and dozens of other things, perhaps the public perception might have been a bit different. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Lame Souls wannabe. When Respawn Entertainment CEO Vince Zampella teased Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order at E3 2018, we were intrigued. After all, EA had questionable results with its Star Wars projects. Could this be different though? Cue E3 2019 and the first gameplay presentation felt underwhelming. The visuals and aesthetic were nice, but the combat looked like a budget version of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, intermixed with some Uncharted-like adventuring. When the game finally released, it was indeed a game with Sekiro-like combat and Uncharted-like exploration, and it was pretty darn fun, offering some good challenge, a well-told story, likable characters, and genuinely interesting set pieces. Metroid: Samus Returns. Really? Mercury Steam? When you think Metroidvania, your first thought probably doesn't go to Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate. Developed by Mercury Steam, it wasn't downright awful, but also not very good or befitting the franchise's 2D legacy. So when it was announced that Mercury Steam was developing the Metroid 2 remake Samus Returns, there was nothing but concern. Thankfully, the developer proved up to the task, reimagining the original in awesome ways, with excellent production values and new mechanics like melee combat. Dark Souls. It's unfairly tough. The initial air around Dark Souls at launch was that it was tough to an unfair degree. So many rage compilations were created based on its difficulty. Masters of the game were viewed with awe. We're not going to trot out the tough but fair cliche or the fact that players had to just get good, but all these years later, it's become much more obvious that Dark Souls and other games like Sekiro, Nioh, Bloodborne, etc. are more about patience and knowledge. What you did wrong, what's the best strategy, and so on. These would decide one's success. Suddenly, the game became less about difficulty just for the sake of it, and there was greater focus on the lore and its metaphors for loneliness in a doomed world. But that's another story for another day. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. It doesn't look that tough. So you've played Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Nioh, and maybe some Monster Hunter. Upon seeing Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice and its mechanics, you probably thought, surely I'm ready. In truth, only some of us were. Those Souls fans that took to the mechanics found a meaty game of deflections, counters, jumping, and some of the best combat around. Those that didn't found themselves dying, again and again and again. Practice makes perfect though, as they say, even if you swear you're never going back. No Man's Sky. There's no way it's gonna bounce back. A recipient of many Biggest Disappointment of the Year awards, Hello Games' No Man's Sky seemed fairly doomed at launch. It was pretty successful sales-wise, but even its fans admitted to disappointment in the lack of multiplayer or polish or a strong direction. Detractors felt this was it for the studio, and there was no coming back, let alone any possible way they could turn things around. Lo and behold, Hello Games did all this and more, adding base building, more story content, better visuals, multiplayer, social spaces, and much more. Today, the fanbase for No Man's Sky is vibrant and the game's future is bright, further proving that it's nice to be wrong about some things. The Division. This game is dead and the devs don't care. The Division found itself in a similar situation as No Man's Sky, but not at launch. The game had its bugs and issues, but it was still very enjoyable. Unfortunately, the messy scaling and difficulty, stingy loot drops, numerous glitches and breeding ground of toxicity that was the Dark Zone sapped any goodwill. There was a feeling that Massive Entertainment didn't understand what its community wanted. However, several months later, the first of several major updates would arrive to revamp the entire game, introducing better loot drops, more reasons to play in the LZ, and better balanced activities. This would subsequently mark the Division's rise, even if it still had a few bumps along the way. The Last Guardian. It's never coming out. The Last Guardian was first revealed at E3 2009 as the next game from Ico and Shadow of the Colossus director Fumito Ueda. It seemed like a slam dunk, but quickly faded into obscurity. Ueda's departure from Sony, though he remains the director, didn't help either. Originally planned for the PS3, The Last Guardian would be announced for the PS4, but there was still no release date in sight. We thought it was never coming, and even if it did, it couldn't possibly be a good game. Sure enough, The Last Guardian released in 2016 and received strong critical acclaim. And yes, it was a good game at the end of the day. Monster Hunter World. The combat is clunky and unintuitive. Anyone who wants to get into Monster Hunter World, or any entry in the series, is daunted by several key things. Grinding is one, but the combat is probably a bigger issue. Initially, I felt the combat to be clunky, slow, and unintuitive. However, as it turned out, Monster Hunter World's combat was so much deeper. Different weapons demanded different approaches, monsters took time to master, preparation was key, etc. Plus, the weapons started to feel hefty and right in their own way, granting even more personality to each weapon type. It may take some time to get used to, but make no mistake, it was well worth the effort.
And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily, so make sure you don't miss them by subscribing. We appreciate your support, and we thank you for checking us out.